Today I'm going to talk about what we can do with our CPF OA funds given that interest rates are dipping. In the last video, I talked about how T-bills have reached as low as 3.34% per annum, and since then, the latest T-bill is only at 3.13% per annum, and I think it will continue to slide further. So what are some things we can do with our CPF OA? Last week's video, I talked about how I'm dealing with my cash savings in light of falling rates, and someone said that it was not a timely video because SSBs were going to close. People, this is why I keep saying you need to subscribe to the Telegram and turn on notifications so that you don't miss time-sensitive updates. Now, given that one of the most popular ways of dealing with our CPF funds is not as great as before, what are some things we can do with our CPF funds? As always, while I hope that this video will be helpful and useful to you, it is not personal financial advice, so please exercise your own due diligence. If you look at CPF OA's 2.5% per annum rate, T-bills can still be viable to earn a little bit more interest, but you should know that you cannot simply take the T-bill rate and minus off CPF OA's 2.5% per annum rate to calculate the additional interest. Depending whether you're investing new funds into T-bills from your CPF OA or if you're rolling over funds from a maturing T-bill, the situation is a bit different. For those who are investing new funds from their CPF OA, your funds are typically deducted from your CPF OA 1 or 2 days after the auction date. In case you didn't know, whenever money is withdrawn from your CPF balance, the amount withdrawn will not get interest within that month. This means that if you withdraw $10,000 on the 30th of the month, the whole $10,000 will not earn interest for the entire month. This means that if you're investing in a 6-month T-bill for the first time, you will lose 7 months of CPF interest. For example, if you invest $20,000 in the upcoming T-bill with 12 September auction date, what happens is that $20,000 will be deducted from your CPF OA in 1 to 3 days time after 12 September, and therefore this $20,000 will not earn interest for the whole of September. When March 2025 rolls along, the $20,000 will be credited into your CPF investment scheme account. You can then manually transfer it back, and the $20,000 will also not earn interest in the month of March 2025. This means that you will have lost out on 7 months of CPF OA's 2.5% per annum interest in exchange for the T-bill's interest rate. If the T-bill cutoff yield is 2.92% per annum, you will have made $292 of interest from the T-bill. It would have been $291.67 if you have left it at CPF OA earning 2.5% per annum. So you really want your 6-month T-bill to be more than 2.92% per annum interest. Now there are even cases where you can lose as many as 8 months of CPF interest. The upcoming T-bill with auction date 26 September is one such example. When you invest in that T-bill, your CPF OA funds is likely going to be deducted by the end of September, and therefore the entire September that amount will not earn interest, and the T-bill will mature on the 1st of April. This results in funds not earning CPF OA interest from September to April, which is a total of 8 months of interest lost. Now, this means that the T-bill needs to have a cut-off yield of at least 3.33% per annum to make sense. Don't forget also that there are bank charges such as the $2.50 transaction cost and the $2 quarterly charge. Therefore, there are 2 things to take note of when you invest your CPF OA into T-bills. 1. Would you lose 7 or 8 months of CPF interest for a particular T-bill? I will update my Telegram channel on such things each month, so subscribe for this. Number 2, if you do non-competitive bidding, you might get interest rates that are not favorable and end up worse than leaving your CPF OA alone in the first place. So please either do competitive bidding of at least 3% per annum for the 7-month kind or at least 3.4% for the 8-month kind to ensure that you are not worse off as a result of investing into T-bills and paying the transaction costs. Note that whatever I've just mentioned applies to new funds being taken out from your CPF OA to invest in T-bills. If you are rolling over a maturing T-bill, the good news is that this does not affect you that much, provided the funds from your maturing T-bills are invested into a new T-bill within the same month. Another use I have for my CPF OA funds is to upgrade my property. If you have watched my previous video, you should know that I'm looking at moving, possibly to someplace bigger. I feel like I've outgrown my current place and it's time to move. Now that rates are lower, mortgage rates should also come down a little bit more. And given Singaporeans' love for property, I think I don't really have to say this, but those with bigger OA balances might want to consider buying a property if they haven't already done so, or perhaps upgrading if they already have their own place. Again, this is not financial advice, and you should make sure you can afford buying, servicing the mortgage, and other costs before jumping into it. Anyway, like I said, I'm selling my place, so check out my home tour and hit me up if you're looking to buy. Using CPF OA to pay for a property gets you this thing called accrued interest, but unlike what some people think, accrued interest is not a bad thing. I've talked about it before, so check out my older video or my article for more info. Finally, my CPF OA savings is also a sort of backup reserve for mortgage payments. My mortgage payment has been around $1,600 per month, so the first $20,000 provides for about 12 months of backup. If I move to a new place and the mortgage is doubled, right, I think I will need maybe $40,000 to provide 1 year of backup in case anything happens and then I run out of liquidity to pay for my mortgage, and my CPF OA can do the job for me. Another long-standing option that CPF members have is to transfer their CPF OA funds to their special account for added interest. Since CPF OA's interest is at 2.5% per annum and CPF SA is around 4% per annum, transferring from your OA to SA gets you more interest and compounding over the years. Before you do this, you need to know that SA funds are a lot more locked up than OA funds. You can't use SA funds for things like housing, and it's strictly meant for retirement in future in the form of CPF Life. Such a transfer is not reversible, so you should only do it if you're confident you won't need these funds in your OA anymore. At age 55, any amount up to your full retirement sum will go to your retirement account for CPF Life, with funds above the FRS going back to your OA. At that time, you can still use your OA for things like housing or even withdraw it as cash. Or you could also use your OA to top up your retirement account up to the enhanced retirement sum, which is currently twice of the full retirement sum from 2025 onwards. Personally, I won't be exploring transferring my OA funds to SA funds that much because CPF OA transfer to SA shares the same cap as using cash to top up my SA. We can only top up to the full retirement sum, regardless whether you are using your CPF OA or cash. Now, for cash top-ups, there is tax relief, so while my earning ability is still high during my working years, I want this option to be available so that I can reduce my payable tax. And if I use my OA to do that, I won't get tax relief, and I also reduce the amount I can top up using cash. Number 2, as mentioned earlier, I'm looking to buy property soon, so having more funds in my CPF OA helps with that. Those who have yet to settle their home buying plans, I think, should also consider carefully before transferring OA funds to your SA. But if you're already someone who has settled your property and have not much use for your CPF OA funds, I think transferring to SA is actually a good choice, especially if you're risk averse and don't want to look at the next option. One more option I can think of is to invest your CPF savings for the long term. Just like T-bills, the first $20,000 of your CPF OA cannot be invested. Beyond that, you're able to use CPF Investment Scheme or CPF IS to invest in certain allowed investments. For CPF OA, you can invest in things like some unit trusts, exchange traded funds, certain insurance policies like ILPs, annuities, or endowments. There are also things like shares, corporate bonds, and gold ETFs, etc. It is a relatively restricted list, so it can be difficult to do things like invest in the US or global markets. Luckily, there is now actually a decent way to invest your CPF funds for the long term. A couple of months ago, Dimensional introduced 3 new funds approved for CPF IS. These funds can help CPF investors invest in global equities and bonds in a globally diversified and low-cost manner. Provident helped to seed the launch with its clients being the first investors to be in these funds in Singapore. Now, full disclaimer, I work at Provident, but because I don't get commissions, I don't really have an incentive to promote this, and I'm just sharing something that I think is a viable option. You can also access these funds through Endowers, and you can use my link if you want for some sign-up reward, and that does actually give me some referral incentive, and the link you can find it in the description box below. This again is not financial advice, and you need to be aware that such investments can be volatile in the short term and your capital is not guaranteed, so make sure you have the risk appetite for it and the time horizon for the investments to reap returns in the long run. Personally, this is my preferred choice once I've settled my property move. I will have another piece to look more in depth into CPF investing, so stay tuned for it, and the best way is by my Telegram channel. So in all, this is what I'm going to do with my CPF OA. T-bill rates are pretty low now and likely not going to be very much more than CPF OA's 2.5% per annum interest moving forward, so it's unlikely I will use OA funds for my T-bills anytime soon. My CPF OA funds would be used to help pay for my new apartment and also be a source of backup savings for a mortgage. Once I have enough OA funds for that, any excess funds I will unlikely transfer them to SA because I rather use cash to top up for tax relief. Instead, any excess CPF funds will go towards investing for the long term, and I have almost 20 years till I'm aged 55, so I think there's a decent runway for that. Stay subscribed for more updates on that, and also check out this video where I review my CPF savings a while ago, and I'll see you in that video.